catch up on the internet places, and it
Easy.
looks like we're live. Welcome everybody to episode 9 of season 3, Level Up Your Wealth podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Marcus Howard. Mario couldn't be here today, but we've got an excellent episode today. Richard is joining us all the way from London. Is that
Bir-
correct?
Bir- Birmingham, the fair second city of the UK. So, but only 90 minutes from London on a train. So
Okay.
yeah, close.
My geography is terrible, so to
No, no,
me,
no. Same. Don't worry about it.
pardon my ignorance. It's all one area.
No. I couldn't do US cities either, and I lived there for like 6 years. So
Yeah. You were in Atlanta, at least in 2017, right?
yeah, that's correct. And I had the pleasure of living in Nevada for a couple of years after that. So, and obviously been going to New York my whole life. I love the East Coast. So it's a hell of a country, but still geographically, I'm incredibly poor. So
All right. Well, we're going to kick off a quick game of rock, paper, scissors. While we're doing
mm,
that, let us know where you're tuning in from. Say hi. Richard's here. He's a veteran in the space, 20 years in the industry, worked with some of the biggest names and covered some of the biggest news in the ecosystem. He's one of the go-to, like 5 people that I have subscriptions to from like where I get my insights. It's like you, Cecilia, James Fudge, and I forget the other 2 because I've been up all day. But here
don't
we're
you worry about it. Oh, those two are very good choices as well. Cecilia's been killing it since she came into esports. She's not an endemic, but
Mhm.
she's had some huge stories. And James Fudge, he's kind of because I'm getting old now. He's like an inspiration to me because he's running pretty much a publication all by himself, but not just in like an editorial capacity. He's the guy who goes out and gets the news as well. And I did that when I was in my like 20s, and it was incredibly hard then. So I every time I start feeling weak, I just think, what would James Fudge do? And I'm just back,
You
back in the
find this
room.
straight.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna play this game.
Okay.
Hopefully you can't see my screen.
I can't. Yeah, I can't see
Okay,
what you're doing.
all right, cool. So first to 10 points, rock, paper,
All right.
scissors, win, lose, or draw, and we'll get this kicked off here.
Okay.
So I start by losing. This
Mm,
is what I consider the future of esports, and a lot of people roll their eyes and kind of gag when I say that. But I believe that esports should be accessible and inclusive, and I believe that any game has the potential for esports. And I think of esports as like a competitive community that, like, if
hmm
a grassroots community can support tier 1 play. So you might not see like maybe this at the Madison Square Gardens, right? But I think that
Yeah.
any community can and should be leveraging esports for community engagement.
No, and I've always felt that way myself as well. I've never been snooty about esports in the sense that a lot of people are like maybe adverse to mobile or whatever it's been historically. That's never been me, because if people within esports start looking at other esports with that kind of derisory look, then you have to sort of understand you're just the people that look at like Counter Strike or Dota or other theoretically bigger esports titles with the same derision. So we shouldn't do that. We should know better and be a bit more open minded.
And I played this game. We're now into this 3rd season, so we've had guests of all
Mm,
ages and around the world and different demographics, and everybody seems to appreciate and understand what this is and
mm.
jump into it quickly. And I think one of the
For sure.
reasons that esports isn't sustainable is that it's not as accessible. We're looking at only less than 1% of the global gaming industry from a revenue perspective. And if we're only always looking at the top tier 1 teams, like, what about the other 3 billion people who play video games on a weekly basis?
Yep. Correct. What you have to understand this as well. I mean, there's like it's only rock, paper, scissors. But if you were to give this like production value, if you were to give this like statistics, if we were to have commentators right now going, Richard's inside his mind, and and things like this, like it would be way more hype, right? You would you
Right,
would you would feel like you were engaged in an esports experience, and I know this is true because obviously we've seen this done with geolocator. So
right. And then you won. So congratulations, Richard.
no worries, I was inside your head there. I'm very good at reading. Years of being an investigative journalist and an interviewer, very good. I was kind of like going back to the camera, having a look at your eyes, kind of looking at your body language. Oh yeah, totally scissors, and then coming back to it. So it's not fair. I did have a bit of an advantage there, probably.
No problem, no problem. Yeah. So thanks again for joining, and you're in London. So you recently had to leave the country because again, we connected back in 2017, DreamHack Atlanta.
Correct.
That was actually when I was first introduced to esports. I connected with you by accident.
Yeah.
We had some mutual colleagues there who one of them had gotten an investor. I think you've investigated once or twice over your career into Denial Esports, and and ironically, I was about to get that same investor. And so the reason that I was there was that one of our other guests there at that event was asking me if I had signed the paperwork. And I still have a copy of it. It had very predatory terms. Like the investor basically was like triple dipping, right?
Yeah.
To use the
I remember that, funnily enough. It's kind of, you have to understand, I mean, historically, and I make no bones about it, I've been a big party guy down the years. I'm like 2 months sober at the moment, not permanently. It's just because I was getting really fat, right? So I was like, I needed to do something, and it's been hell. It's been torture, But what I will say is, I remember that quite distinctly, and I don't always remember the kind of happenings at esports events for one reason or another. But yeah, it was one of those kind of serendipitous meetings because it was so emblematic of what happens in esports that here you were, a good person, enthusiastic about the space, bringing lots of positive ideas and energy, and unfortunately for you, the first people you met realistically were there was one or two of them looking to take advantage of your good nature and maybe a little bit of your space naivety. And so one of the things that I've always said is super important, one of the reasons why, listen, it is sometimes worth listening to the olds in the space. I know it looks like gatekeeping. I know it looks like we never shut up. I know it looks like we're always singing our praises. That's probably all true. But, to some degree. But the reality is as well, we know some stuff. And the stuff that we know is we can remember the names of the serial grifters. Sometimes the serial grifters even change their names, so they can do it multiple times. And we know that. And, as somebody that's written consistently about that type of activity in the space, as I said, I'm coming up on 20 years. It'll be 20 years somewhere in September, which blows my mind. It's a long time to put into anything. But the one good thing that I like to do is help new people when they come in and say, avoid this guy and avoid that guy and don't talk to her and don't do business with this company, because these things can really be important in the wider context. I think you're a good person to have in the space. You might not be here now. Had we not had this chance meeting at a live event? And that would be very, very sad.
Yeah. I agree with you. And unfortunately, I've heard that same, from firsthand experience, heard that same kind of description of esports events, right? So there was an esports conference here at a local university, and they brought in some of the biggest names circa 2019. And I happened to had the privilege to be one of the speakers because they were representing a local ecosystem. And while we were all kind of in the break room preparing to go on stage, I heard a conversation from a very well-known name, two very well-known names, and one was describing Esports Bar, Miami,
right? Yeah.
Which you may or may not have been to. It's not here anymore, right? But they said that it was a bunch of non-endemic brands. I wasn't able to go to this event, but this person was recounting this event where everyone who was from the endemic space was basically staring down the non-endemic brand representatives like hyenas. Just waiting for the opportunity to pick them to pieces.
Yeah, it's 100% the way that it goes. It's the sad reality I think is, a lot of the time, again, it looks like us olds are kind of gatekeeping, and I get that. I've said this in multiple interviews. I reject the premise that gatekeeping is some sort of entirely negative practice. If you gatekeep good people, then yeah, it's bad. If you are bigoted in some way and you want to exclude people on that basis, it's bad. But ultimately, a lot of gatekeeping is we don't want the wolves, the foxes, to get into the hen house, and you have to and trust me, at the start of esports, I was an evangelical. I was the ultimate ambassador for the scene. I used to go out. I brought in lawyers. I brought in agents. I brought in sponsors. I brought in companies. I did, all sorts of, crossover work in the media. I was always looking to try and make this bigger than what it was, and I got burned so many times. Like, those people turned out to be just bad people with bad intentions. Once they either realized they can make money by doing nefarious things and chose that, or they realized they couldn't make money without doing nefarious things and left. And so when you get a sense of who's good and who's not, and who has good intentions and who's pure and wants to be part of something, and wants to be a builder, essentially, that's when you sort of have to put your foot down and go, no, sorry, you can't come in. You can't come in. I know what you want to do. I know why you're here. I've seen it a million times before. Esports is a lot bigger now, and so everybody wants to have a say in that. And I think some people reject that. People think that if you've been around like a long time, a few decades in esports, you're worried. You're worried about slipping into irrelevancy, and you think new people are going to take your jobs and your opportunities. I mean, that's never been true for me, at least. I can't speak for everybody. And I just want I just want us to stop getting hard reset back to zero every, like, 8 to 10 years. It's got to stop at some point, because we're not getting any further forward. We're going to get to the end of esports winter, and we're going to go, this feels a lot like 2015. What are we doing? It's wild.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I'm hoping that we'll start to see a shift in again kind of the culture
Mm.
of esports, the culture or really the standard of integrity. I joke with James Fudge often that like having integrity is the most expensive thing in esports
Oh yeah, yeah. I
because
can
people,
testify
ironically,
to
or
that.
sadly, like the people who have the most amount of money, unfortunately, are doing some of the least um, responsible and trustworthy things in this ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like, the money definitely changed the space overall. It changed people within the space. There's like, I know a lot of people, and again, I won't name names. I won't embroil you as sort of, a pedestrian to my drama. But if you follow my work, you know the kind of people I go after. And the problem we've got with a lot of these people is they smelled the money and they just changed as people. These are the same people that helped me build this business. These are the same people that helped build space. In many of them, most of them maybe, accomplished way more than me, built things that people could engage with. You're always limited as a journalist. You're just a tattletale, glorified tattletale, and everybody hates you because you're telling a young audience Santa Claus doesn't exist,
Right.
every week, and they hate it. These people built orgs for fans to engage with, and successful teams, and help put games on the map. And yet, when they had the chance to get the investment money, they couldn't say no to it, and they didn't say no to it. They said yes to it, and then they said yes to some more, and yes to some more, and suddenly they're telling lies about the industry and the size of it and how sustainable it is, and they're telling lies about what the future looks like for esports, and they're lying to their investors, and they're fudging numbers to sponsors. And then you see them in a sports car, and you go, you're a little bit too young for a midlife crisis, so why are you driving that Ferrari, dude? And the problem is, money has this corrosive effect on morals. And if you, the first time you really get some, it's the ultimate test. It's the ultimate test of who you are. And, the industry has sort of felt that, as a collective. That's really what's happened to esports. We did make it, and it turned out to be the worst thing that could have happened to us.
Precious is agreeing with you everything that you're
Mm.
saying here
I
about the
got one
reset.
eye on the chat. Yeah, I think I've made a friend here. It's nice that Precious agrees with what I'm saying. It's good. I'm always worried people are going to think I'm kooky and crazy. So thank you for the support.
Do you think that we could have done a better job with being stewards of brand sponsorships, given that like by the numbers it represents 60% of the global revenue? Should we
Mm.
have done a better job with delivering ROI?
I mean, of course, Marcus, and you know it. The problem has been the elusive ROI and the promise of ROI. And initially, when we first started getting money to come into the space, and we first started getting sponsors and investors, and I'm talking very early on, they were the right kind of investors and the right kind of sponsors, because back then that we sort of knew there could be an ROI. But we all agreed, we all sat around the table, again, as the great esports collective, and we went, the ROI isn't there yet. And they went, yeah, we know. But you've got the demographic, right? And so we like that as a company or sponsor and investor. We like the demographic, and we like the fact it's tech and it's cutting edge and gaming's becoming more ubiquitous in media. So the ROI doesn't matter for now, because we think there will be one. And everyone in esports went, we don't have to come up with one for now. So we deferred the ROI, and we did that for about a decade, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then the ROI became clear. The ROI was suddenly we had this huge, really big audience, and a big audience of that desirable, 18 to, let's say, 31, being, an older fan, that demographic who's got disposable income to spend on things, like, wow, yeah, this is it's what every brand wants to talk to, and a high level of engagement, because let's be real, esports fans are generally fanatics, kind of like sports fans, except they're more fanatical about it than the average sports fan, but they do have a tendency to spend less annually. The fanaticism and the spending doesn't really run parallel in esports, as we found out. But at that point, we identified what the ROI, what the vector for the ROI was going to be, what the path to the return of investment was going to be. And we said, okay, let's do it. Let's go down that path, and surely it will work out. And it wasn't working out. And then we said, okay, we'll tell the investors and the sponsors that it's coming. It is coming. And then another year. And then we say, okay, it hasn't arrived yet. In fact, it's kind of getting worse. Another year. And then another year. We're just plate spinning. And we hope it's all going to work out. And then obviously the pandemic was ultimately the real shakeup, because in every other industry, it was a problem, but in our industry, the pandemic was the best thing that could have happened, because we finally got that growth, and we finally got high viewership, and we finally got more people engaging with our product than ever before. And people were locked indoors, and they started making, like, I would never buy this ordinarily, but I may as well buy it now because I can't go outside, I can't see my family, can't see my friends, can't go to a concert, can't go to a sports event. So I may as well spend money on a Cloud9, jersey, or a piece of digital merchandise. And everybody got away with it again. We were just about to have the reckoning in 2019.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit, and it glossed over everything for another few years. And then bang, here we are now. And think about how long that deferment has been in real terms. And yeah, turns out you got to pay the piper. Here we are.
And it's baffling to me that people have been ignoring the warning signs, right? I've followed your work for a number of years, and your insights, and like Sebastian Burton, who a mutual colleague of ours, and James, that type of insight has made it clear to me that there were some structural issues with the ecosystem. And I can't speak for you, but I think that you've not made a lot of friends warning about, like, the doomsday that's coming, and now people are calling you a doomer. Like, you've been, not from my perspective, you haven't been trying to say esports is dead, but that esports is dying if we don't make a corrective action.
And more importantly, right, what do we want esports to be at the end of the day? Right? Like, what do we want it to be? This is the question no one really asks. We say esports is succeeding, it's winning. And then we say esports is dying, or esports is dead. It's not that simple, because even now, at a bleak point, and as I was saying before we went live, this is my third bubble, so I'm not, like, I don't think it's ever going to die in the same way that it's like saying, we've got record layoffs in the games industry. No one's saying the video games industry is dead, because it's video games. It's an art form. It's an entertainment medium. We're now entering. Well, I mean, we've already done it. Entire generations of people, they won't remember a time before video games. There simply isn't a time. It's what they will do. It's what they will do with their spare time. So no one's saying the industry's dead. No one's saying the video games industry is dead. It's facing challenges. and it's shaping what it wants to be. More unionizations, less crunch, better quality of games. We're moving away, games as a live service are kind of like becoming a bit ick. People, consumers don't want to touch them. We're having a single player renaissance right now. So it's an evolution of all of these trends coming together, because ultimately, if you don't cater to consumers, you're not going to make money. Esports is a little bit different because we're meant to be theoretically community based. It's meant to be about people coming together to build things and have leagues and spaces where people can compete and earn money, maybe even earn a living, maybe even earn a salary, and attain glory and recognition for being the best in show at a particular video game. Now, do we want esports to be holistic in the sense that are all esports equal? Should we all sit around a campfire and the FGC delegates and the Dota delegates and the League of Legends delegates and the Counter-Strike delegates and the Rocket League delegates, we all sing Kumbaya and we all worship our games equally, and we put on a unified front and we say to all the investors, invest in one, invest in all. In fact, actually, the new tournament structure is we're going to have one of every single esports game in the collective, and we're only going to do that because individual tournaments might create tribalism and drag us away. Are we saying that? No, we're not saying that. Okay, right, cool. So what is esports then, right? What do we want it to be? We want it to be its own little self-contained circuits where they're sustainable. They're their own mini ecosystems, and each one is going to look very different, and each one is going to have a different level of interest and a different level of ROI and a different level of longevity and a different level of developer interest and input, right? So everything's different, and yet we're all a collective somehow. So what do we want it to be like? And we're not, we're just basically now surrendering to allow esports to be essentially a corporate plaything. It's going the same way as sports. What we're doing is we are allowing all of these interests to take over entire leagues, entire, those little, hermetically sealed, environments and ecosystems that I was talking about. They're taking over that, and the only thing that matters when they do is what they want to get out of it. So we're seeing this with developers and their disastrous franchise leagues, which could never realistically have a return of investment for anyone but them.
Right.
Their share is always the lion's share for everything. Your sponsors, I get my cut though, right? You hustled them, but I get my cut, right? So the developer leagues were a disaster. We've seen that. Now we've got the Saudi leagues. I mean, politically motivated. It's an extension of their sports washing project. Doesn't have anyone's interest at heart beyond their own. But hey, they're paying for it, I guess. And so this is the bigger, profounder question. This is a really long, rambly answer to a short thing, which is to say, what do we want esports to look like? Because it isn't dead, but for me, it may as well be. Because I don't want to be part of, I don't want to have to, say, oh, thank you, Your Highness, on a stage in Riyadh just to participate. I don't want to have to obscure human rights violations and pretend they're not happening just to earn a crust. I won't do that. I'm not going to do that. Esports is forcing everybody to make this choice.
Right.
And so I don't want esports to be like this. So it may as well be dead for me. But if everyone else is comfortable with this, welcome to your brave new world, I guess.
Yeah. And this is not a dig at specifically at the Middle Eastern region or Saudi Arabia. I think if it was any one country that had done the consolidation of a global ecosystem, as we're seeing now in Saudi Arabia, I would be firing warning shots across the bow so that everyone can see that as well.
Well, I mean, case in point, we've had similar issues with China and how because it's the single largest market, if you want to do business in China, which everybody does, you're going to have to let some things go. Yeah. Certain countries aren't going to be allowed to exist. Certain things can't be in your games. We've already seen, for example, Gen G have lost out on a bunch of stuff because they accidentally used the word Taiwan in when they were organizing a fan meet and greet.
Yeah.
So this is it's insidious, and it's creeping into every little aspect of it. And you're right, it's not just Saudi Arabia. We got multiple issues. I've talked a lot about military recruitment happening through. The military is spending a lot of money in esports right now, the US military
Yep.
specifically. And it's not just them. If you've ever been to Sweden, if you've ever been to DreamHack, in Stockholm, all the big lands have military presence there. They're looking to get kids who are, perhaps, I don't want to say vulnerable, that might be overselling it, but if you show
Impressionable.
them, yeah, exactly, impressionable, that's the right word. If you
Yeah.
if you show them, oh look, a tank can be controlled with an Xbox controller, and they're like 12, they
Yeah.
might be thinking, wow, this is great, and that goes on everywhere. I don't want that either. That isn't for me what esports was meant to be about. It wasn't meant to be a means for governments and regimes to, assert their machinations. It wasn't meant to be about that. And unfortunately, because we didn't pay the piper for so long, we're having to take that money now because that's the only money coming in at the moment. That's the justification people are giving themselves.
What do you think about the prospect of non-endemic brands spawning their own esports, either organizations or ecosystems, as a natural extension of their social media teams? Here's an example.
Okay.
This is not esports, but Chick-fil-A is now hiring its own
Mm,
producers, and I assume they intend to build their own internal game development team, as
hmm
opposed to going to license. I don't know, a company that has like a chicken for a mascot, or a gaming company with a chicken for a mascot, where you would pay
right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars for that licensing, right? But just building their own minor games internally. What if, instead of paying 5, 6, 7 figures to tier one teams, these same brands build their own internal teams and use it as organic grassroots community engagement for their brand, their customers, their current customers, their current employees, and their prospective customers? What do you think about that?
It's interesting. I mean, again, you've always got the question, how, because the one thing I'll say about esports fans in general is they can smell inauthenticity. They
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
right? And obviously, we've seen how brands have leveraged social media. They do that cringe-worthy thing, don't they? Where Wendy's will have an argument with McDonald's, and they'll all try and dunk on each other, and suddenly there's like 10 fast food brands in a chain, and it's just some social media intern trying to come up with a really good, Mad Lib,
Right.
and people watch that, and they're either disgusted or horrified. I'm in the latter camp. It's like, what an insane dystopia where we've got the Wendy's girl pretending to be a real person and insulting Grimace from McDonald's or whatever. It's like, it's gross. But so fans are resistant to that. You watch that and you go, ugh, silence brand. You're not really interested in it. So it would have to be authentic, and that creates the problem. Like, what are they realistically looking to do? Because it's one thing to run a tournament, it's another thing to make your own chicken themed game. And then and try and give that some cultural relevancy and impact. Which isn't to say it can't be done. Strange things have happened, obviously. What I think the best way for brands right now to engage with esports is to find communities that value the product they offer and are genuinely going to be grateful for the presence in existing tournaments and infrastructure. I'm not talking about slapping a logo on a tournament. I'm not talking about, like just minimal engagement. I'm talking about, like, listen, I bang on Evo and that kind of tournament, and I've been critical about it, but I'll just say, the Chipotle activation was done pretty well. They really oversold it. They were like, it's a huge corporate sponsorship, and it amounted to just some free burrito bowls or whatever. But
Yeah.
if you ever get fans chanting the name of a sponsor, you're onto something.
Yeah.
And we had that in E League, with Arby's. We
Mm-hmm.
did a big deal with Arby's, and we did a load of content around Arby's sandwiches, and people were literally chanting for Arby's when they saw the logo, fly by on the screen. And that level of engagement is because the fans are grateful. They want you there. They know that you are supporting something they care about. Now, for every game, there can be the next Arby's. You've just got to be able to identify where the crossover is, and that's really what they should be putting their, kind of PR teams onto, rather than making like some bad game where you're a nugget and you bounce around and you bring in a bunch of like pro gamers to see you can get a high score, and you do a cheesy YouTube video and you have to turn the comments off. That's not going to help you,
Right.
But what is going to help you is identifying a group of esports enthusiasts that really like your product, really need the help, really need the attention, and they're going to reciprocate and show you, the kind of love you wouldn't get from any other, kind of corporate venture.
Is Shopify Rebellion, is that the former that's
Mm.
cringeworthy, or the latter where it's part of the culture?
It's an interesting example, actually. The thing with the Shopify takeover is, of the, particularly the TSM slot in League of Legends, is that it's a pretty large commitment, particularly at this moment in time. And so you would have to say that they're absolutely, I mean, they're deadly serious about what they're doing. Now, I definitely don't think it's cringe. I do think their name, like insisting on it being called Shopify Rebellion, I get it. It kind of sucks as a name.
Yeah.
It doesn't roll off the tongue, and it's not, very, very exciting to sort of say like I am into Shopify. But I think what they've done pretty well is, if you look at the way they've not repurposed, but the way they've when they took over the socials, and the way that they've kind of put esports like really front and center, and sort of helped ease people into understanding what the Shopify, what it is, and what the benefits are, and why they like and value esports. Plus, they also hired a bunch of esports endemic people to work on the esports side of things. So I actually think that's an example of a brand sort of doing it right. I wouldn't have paid what they paid
Mhm.
for some of the things that they acquired, but I will certainly say I think they've at least treated the space with respect, and I think they're getting stuff back from it, right? Other wouldn't have spent as much as they did.
And so that's my hope for the space, is if we see more, authentic, sincere, meaningful entries into the esports space for non-endemic brands. You, again, as an extension of the social media team, you may start to see people hire tournament TOs and
Yeah, sure.
producers and everyone, and now we start to recover some of these thousands of jobs we've lost over the last 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, which is another key thing, right? The idea of job creation. It might not be everyone's idea of the perfect solution, but let's be real. A lot of the people who lost jobs, it was probably their first esports job. I mean, I imagine a lot of them were, not tenured. I know some were, but in general, I saw a lot of people that unfortunately had, they've left home, or they've left college, and they've come to the big city on the promise of an esports job, and 3 to 6 months in, and they've had it pulled out from under them because, sorry, this wasn't sustainable. Now, the idea of those people being able to get jobs, like working in like a Chipotle, or in an esports division, there's value there for sure. Those people definitely don't deserve to get one chance and then kind of be cast out, and not have another opportunity. But yeah, I think the job creation aspect is kind of underrated when these types of brands kind of come into the space, because if you're able to present yourself as someone that's competent and has a knowledge of esports culture, then yeah, you're a prized asset, because you're in a very, very tiny niche. So yeah, I mean, I hope every time I see one of these brands, it's like, again, that reflex kicks in. I get super nervous because it's like I don't know what their expectations are, and I don't know what it is they want, what their ultimate goal looks like. And it's all fun and games at the start with the funny tweets and the funny videos, and then somewhere along the line it can get more sinister and unrealistic. So I always keep an eye on those things. But again, I'm not adverse to it. I think if people want to be here and their intentions are pure and they offer value, then now, by the way, now is the time to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, and I hope that it does happen, doesn't happen, I feel like we have kind of a Ouroboros situation in
Mm.
at least here in North America, maybe globally, with the collegiate space.
Mm.
Because from what I'm tracking, and James would know better than most people because he tracks all the hires and fires and movement around the industry. It seems like most of the new jobs are esports coaches or directors at colleges and high schools. So you like graduate with your esports
Yeah.
degree, and then you basically go right back into education to convince other kids to go get degrees where they can. Like, there's only so many high schools and colleges.
And it's a real problem because I'm sure you know, and we don't have a means of tracking who did what.
Yeah,
And I've heard multiple examples of coaches that are at universities that have said, I was on this team and I coached them and I totally did all this stuff. And then they are given pretty easily, okay, you sound great. And then suddenly they're given dominion over young adults. And, we're talking about, uh, as someone that works in academia myself, you're going to have people that have specific learning needs. You're going to have people that have emotional requirements that they need, ways that they get feedback. There is a lot that goes into interacting with young adults these days with all the pressures they're under, and you have to have a level of sensitivity and understanding. And a lot of these coaches are blundering through. They're treating it like it's LCS finals and not just a collegiate exercise where people learn about the mechanics of being on a team and how to work together and how to compete and what the level is like and how to improve. They're not treating it like that. They're treating it as another resume builder for when they invariably get found out and leave. And we really need to do a better job of safeguarding in collegiate. This is another reason why I don't think gatekeeping is bad. I've seen too many people who they've got a really good line of BS, and they can turn it on at will, and they're getting these collegiate jobs because there's no mechanism through which the institutions can go and check what they're saying. I was a coach on a good team in 2016. Good
right.
luck finding whether or not I'm lying, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem for the college space.
What are your thoughts on ageism in the space? I don't know if I'm sure you remember this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There was another ESL, I think it's a soccer league, European
Mm.
Soccer League.
Yeah.
And then ESL said like wrong ESL boomers, right? And then
Mm.
everybody blew up like, oh, this is the most clever thing that's ever been said. We really stuck it to the next generation of the previous generation. But that like you and I are in our 40s, right? Um,
Yeah.
I'm close to 40. I'll be 39
I've,
next year.
I've been lying, and I keep saying I'm 39 every year.
39 every year,
So
39 plus plus
yeah,
plus plus plus,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, we have this lack of respect for our elders or the veterans in the space or seniors generation or baby boomers.
Hmm.
And now we are getting into that age group. Should we expect that we'll be outcasts, or do we start to look into opportunities for us to continue to be in this space? And I mean, everyone in our age range in esports, like, why are there not more esports tournaments for working adults or for
Mm.
senior citizens? You mentioned that, and I think this is a primary focus and probably a flaw for the esports ecosystem, that we hyper fixated on like 18 to 31, which I'm going to slide that a little bit back to like 16. I'm going to say 16 to 24.
Okay, cool.
In that age range, they have an excess of time. Those people in that age range have an excess of time, but they don't have any money. They spend their parents'
Mm.
money, right?
Yeah,
But who has the excess of time and the expendable capital?
yeah.
The same baby boomers that we're making fun of on Twitter.
Hmm. Well, I've done a really good job of tapping into that demographic. I mean, that's pretty much my audience. We are lapsed esports fans who are probably in the. I mean, put it this way: when I look at my YouTube demographics, I have more people over 65 watching my content than I do under 18.
Wow.
Right? And I'm proud of that number
Yeah.
because listen, a couple of things. This is just broad. This is nothing really to do with esports. The youth should have a healthy disrespect of the older generations. They should be leery about them, should be wary of them. They shouldn't necessarily bow down to their authority like everything they've done is so good. Otherwise, we're never going to move forward as a species. I mean, you know, the generation that came before me, I certainly think they had it easier than I did, and I'm pretty sure I had it easier than some of the generations that are trying to make sense of this world we've built now, right?
Right.
Also doing it in a pressure cooker environment where it's like, I never had to worry about like when I had my worst moments as a teenager getting filmed and it
Yeah.
being on the internet and it lasting forever and everybody seeing it, teachers, prospective employers. I got to be a delinquent in relative peace. So that's something to really think about what these kids go through. Also, when I used to get bullied at school, I went home and the bully wasn't there anymore. Now the bully's on my phone, he's on my Insta, he's in my DMs.
Right.
It never ends. So, I mean, kids have it hard these days for real. And as a result, the kids should say, like, you don't get it and you don't understand. Do we ever? Does the older generation ever understand? Did my parents understand? No, probably not. They didn't get grunge. They didn't understand the musical movements and the sentiments that they were going through when I
Yeah.
was, wearing all black and in my room and all that. They didn't get it then, right? And they
Right.
really didn't get it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just something I was saying because I was a moody teenager. So all of that is to say that there's these younger generations today, they should have a healthy skepticism about the older generation. Here's the problem. The problem is where you're completely dismissive. And it's like, one of the things I've definitely noticed is in my audience with a handful of people that sort of initially reject me and then come into the fold, it's generally he's brash, he's abrasive, and he's old. And you know what young people are like. If you're 30, they think you're like 90. Like they think you're already dead, right? Your
Right.
gray hair is like, oh my god, you look like you're 65. It's like, I actually look pretty good for my age. Like, no joke, like, but it's fine. You'll get there one day. Ah, you're bald. Yep, yep, yep. There's this. If you've
Welcome to
got the
aging.
gene, yeah, if you've got the gene, you've got the gene. Good luck finding out if you do. So look, I get it. Like, but what has to what you also have to realize is people that have been around a while, and this sort of links to the thing we started the conversation. They know a little bit, and they can help you. They can, if you're a young person, they can tell you, stay away from this. It's too good to be true. Don't click on that Steam link. That's a scam as old as time. You're going to lose your skins. Don't sign that contract. And it's just a case of being willing to engage intergenerationally. I try and do it as much as I can. I'm the same as everyone my age. I talk about the Zoomers, right? And I joke about them and how they're all doing TikTok dances and they don't know. Yeah, but it's banter. You call me old and say I'm nearly dead and call me a boomer, right? But when it's important, I'd like to think you would listen to what you've got to say. And I know I'll extend the same courtesy because you can learn a lot by listening to younger people. I think esports is good in the sense that we do have a pretty broad age range, and that becomes more and even as you say, open to senior citizens. I know people who are 60 that play video games, recreationally, and they are not catered to at all in any part of the industry, and maybe they should be. And that could be. I don't know if it would be a growth area. I don't know if it would be like huge, like, oh, Richard, you've just unlocked you've saved esports, you've unlocked all this money. But ultimately, everybody can play esports, and that is true. Not everybody can get on a football field,
Hmm.
right?
That's true.
So we have that advantage. We've always had that advantage, and we need to listen to each other and fully utilize that advantage.
I'm hoping to see more of that. Because again, I think it's not just underserved, it's ignored, it's overlooked,
Mm.
and there's, like you said, there's, I think it would be not only a financial benefit to the ecosystem, but help the culture, because I think you could people will start to appreciate, the, like you said, the experience, the advice, the perspective, and then we have less people who are keyboard warriors. That's my hope anyway. Maybe that's delusional. Uh,
Yeah, it might be a little bit, but I like the sentiment. I think obviously, there's just a lot to be said from listening to like other people of different backgrounds, and that obviously includes age. And we probably don't do it enough because, as I said, somewhere along the line, that healthy and necessary distrust gets conflated with a total, almost histrionic rejection of, you're old, you're bad, you don't get it, you probably don't even know how to use a computer, but and it's a shame because particularly in esports where there's quite a lot to negotiate, particularly if you're good at the game and you want to take it to the next level and maybe be a competitor one day. It is the generation that kind of went before you that's going to be able to help you walk the right path and minimize any risks to yourself so you don't end up falling into one of the many pitfalls. And this can be everything from, I mean, we've just seen people getting, like having potentially dream jobs taken away from them because they've said really unpleasant things on social media. And, we've seen people be unfortunately taken advantage of when they've been in online relationships and sent pictures to people. And, or, you can these things can be avoided if you've got somebody there to help kind of mentor you a little bit and help talk you through what the pitfalls of this digital space can be. So I think it's important to do a little bit of outreach and just have a little bit more trust and understanding between the generations, because the people it sounds like a cliche, but yeah, we've been there, we've done that, we made all the mistakes. Don't you worry. We can tell you
right.
all about it.
It's a smart person learns from their own mistakes. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others.
Indeed.
Do you play the indie games? Are you familiar with indie games? And do you think that maybe with the issues we've seen with AAA game publishers in esports, there's an opportunity for kind of a resurgence of indie games in esports, where maybe our decisions, or those decisions of those companies are driven more by the communities than shareholder price or VC goals?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love indie games. I play lots of every time there's like a new game kind of comes out, like I'll just go out and like buy it. Like I was just talking, funnily enough, the big thing I've been playing a lot of lately was like Balatro. If I'm sure you've seen it.
Card game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they just got wrecked because they use poker hands as their means of progressing, and scoring points to progress through what is ostensibly just a rogue like game. They've been deemed to be gambling, and they got hit with like an 18 plus. And
Yeah.
this game has nothing like that in it. There's no gambling in it. It is just using a deck of cards. And, they got took off a number of markets and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I definitely prefer indie games to a lot of the AAA slop that gets served up year upon year. And I think one of the cool things, and this is, again, irrelevant to esports, this is just talking about gaming. I think one of the cool things is when an influencer or somebody with a large audience, or maybe not even a large audience, but just a really engaged audience, when you stumble on something like that and you show it to people, via a Twitch stream or a YouTube video or a YouTube stream, or whatever, or now people are streaming on X or whatever. um it can totally change like a developer's life cycle. The way a game can like blow up and just capture people's imaginations, and everybody that wants to play it, and then that word of mouth spreads. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's like one of the things that warms my heart when I see that happen. You know, when I see like, you know, for example, this is going back a few years, but if you know the story about Project Zomboid, which is a zombie survival game, they basically they were banging their head against the wall. They made this game, you know, and it was like really rough around the edges when it first came out. It was in Steam Early Access back when that was a thing. And then I think it was a fire. I think they had a fire at their offices, and they lost so much of their work, you know, because it burnt the machines, it burnt the backup machines, and they
Right.
had to like start over from scratch. And anyway, the story spread, and a few big YouTubers kind of started playing the early build of the game and having fun with it. You know, setting each other challenges, and now it's really become like, I mean, you know, this game is now it's over. I think they've been developing it for over 10 years, and it's become like a staple survival game that you just see content for on YouTube all the time. And it's been a huge success, and that wouldn't have been possible without media and influencers and YouTubers coming together to recognize something that was really, really good. So yeah, I love all that stuff. I wish I had a big enough audience that I could like do that a bit more, because you know, John, you know, Total Biscuit was like a dear friend when he was still with us, and
Mhm.
I always thought the things he did for games when he was invested in the game and he could draw attention to a I was super like, I don't want to say envious, I was just in awe of it. I was just in awe of like, you know, what he could do with his audience just by turning on a game, reviewing it, recommending it, playing it a few times, and everybody was so grateful, you know, when he was able to give them attention. And I imagine it must have been a really nice feeling. So yeah, I'd love to be able to do that for like an indie game someday, but I guess I got to get my pump those rookie numbers up a little bit first, you know.
Well, I'm happy to recommend some games to you. You know,
Yeah, please.
when we met 7 years ago, the company I was running was called Project Compute, and so I don't know if you remember
Mm,
that, but my brother and I
yeah,
have a twin brother. He and I were solving game discovery. So our platform was for indie games. So I've been working with indie game studios over 10 years, and I think you know your audience. You don't have to have millions of subscribers, right? Because a
mm,
lot of these studios are 2 to 5 person teams, right? Even the audience of subscribers you have on YouTube would be a dream for them, right? To for them
yeah,
to have their game shown to your audience. So I know some awesome ones I can recommend.
yeah,
You know, if
please,
it
yeah.
makes sense, then if you want to have them on your show or on your channel, I think that both you would enjoy that and some of your community would as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, I mean, when I got my Steam, you know, they do that Steam thing at the end of the year. It was crazy. I can't even remember how many games it was. Let me just see if I've got the screenshot. I took a screenshot, but I couldn't believe it. It was something insane. It was like I'd played 370 games in the year. It
Wow,
was yeah, so like a game a day.
game a day, yeah,
Uh, yeah, and you know, all of them were like little indie games. You know, some I picked up and put like 4 or 5 hours in and never played again.
right.
Some I really got into. But you know, if I see something and I think it's going to be a good, like it's got a good initial premise, I'll just buy it and I'll just give it a whirl. And you know, I always try and recommend the ones that like really stick with me. Probably the one I've done the most recommending of is, and it doesn't even need recommending at this point, but was back when RimWorld first came on Steam.
Mhm.
I just adore that game. I just think it's fantastic. So that's all. I've been pumping that out for years. Like, please buy this game. It's great. I want the developers to keep making new content for it, so please buy it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I'm still trying to find some time to play some more games. I'm going to
mm.
GDC in 2 weeks, so I'm hoping
Oh
to
yeah,
play at least a game or two. I just joined a team that's making digital scent. They have patent pending technology that can create thousands of scents. So they want to use scent as a gameplay mechanic, just like we
I
have
actually
spatial
saw
audio.
this story. I did, because you know, you can imagine the type of inappropriate jokes that were being made.
Not that company, not that company, a different
Not
company.
that, always a different one.
Yeah, not the one you're talking about is not the one I'm working for, and I don't have anything negative to say about them, but this is not that company.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
this is really what, like, s- smells are really like the next frontier of gaming. That's a
Yeah,
real
so
thing.
if you've ever been to, I don't know if you've been to Disney World, but in Disney World
Mm,
in Orlando, in Epcot Center, they have a ride called Soaring to Epcot, and
mhm.
basically it's like a roller coaster or ride where they pick you up off the ground and have you vertical, and you travel around the world, and they pump scent into the space. So it's a giant like screen that goes wall to wall. And because they're pumping in scents, you like waterfalls and the Saharan desert and all these different places, you feel like you're there because they have a scent from that region of the world.
Right.
And so what this team wants to do, because it can create, again, thousands of scents, is use scent as a story mechanic to build mood, to use it as a gameplay mechanic. So there are 20 flowers here, and 5 of them smell like citrus. And the only way to beat the puzzle is to identify out of the 20 flowers which ones smell like citrus, because it's spatial scent. So as you get closer, the scent gets more intense.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, I've seen what they used to call like smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision.
Yeah, right.
Not your grandfather's smell-o-vision.
yeah. I didn't think so. But I mean, so that's sort of interesting because I imagine there's like a virtual reality application of that, right? Like it's gonna be a more immersive component of VR.
So they started in VR 2019, and then have done a lot of health and wellness studies. And if you go to the website ovrtechnology.com, they did a study with the Neuro Meditation Institute, and in their research, their technology created a 33% decrease in depression, a 31% increase of happiness. There's one more stat I can't remember off the top of my head, but they've worked with multiple universities and institutions on the medical side, like impact focused health and wellness. And now they're taking that proven technology and bringing it into gaming.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I'll definitely look into that. I mean, listen, I'm a cynic and a skeptic by nature.
Okay.
So obviously my initial response will always be bunkum. That's just where I'm at, right? You know. But and I won't lie to you. I got too much respect for you to do that. But I mean, I'll definitely look into it because again, I always try and have that. You know, I'm not like snooty or pretentious about anything that can be brought to the table to kind of enhance the overall experience and the value of that experience to the people that participate. Things that sound profoundly silly, you know, trust me, you know, when you actually see them, they're often not. As I said, I remember, you know, I went through this recently. I did a stream where I looked at alternative esports. Like, if Richard Lewis quits all the big ones and quits esports, what would I go and do? And I was like looking at like, you know, farming simulator and geolocator and, you know, all there was like a Roblox Counter-Strike equivalent. I think it was called Counter Blocks.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there was like there was like World of Warships or something. I can't remember, but it was like it was just people blowing up warships with airplanes or something. And I was like, you know what? This is all stuff that I imagine lots of people would find this silly. Even people in esports would find this silly. Oh, the Excel spreadsheet
contest. The Excel. Yeah.
And like I was watching it, and by the way, the Excel spreadsheet, I can't even remember the chap's name, but they have one of the funniest commentators I've ever heard in my life. I was howling with laughter. This guy is too good to be talking about spreadsheets. Like, we need to get this guy into Counter-Strike or something. But I mean, like, for real, it's like, you know, all of that stuff seems silly, but I'm open to it, and I've always been open to it. And I would never have got into esports in the first place if I didn't keep an open mind about things.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll keep you posted. We get some demo units. Maybe we can send you one. But we're running up here to the hour, so I wanted to thank you for your time. But before we go, one more question: where do you see Web3 and blockchain? I'm going to say blockchain, not Web3, because that makes me want to gouge my own eyes out. But blockchain in the future of esports. I know that you had the CEO of Nouns on your podcast. And ironically, when I came to Atlanta in 2017, and I was talking a lot to our group, I don't know if you remember that, about blockchain. You know, I've been in the blockchain ecosystem since the beginning. It launched on my birthday in 2009. I'm not a crypto millionaire because I lost all of my crypto in a scam.
Oh, no.
But
sorry to hear.
I'm battle tested. But I do believe in a future of the esports ecosystem where teams, as you said in your conversation with Nouns, teams are beholden to the community and not to investors.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, look, so again, I because of all the rug pulls and all the scamming and all the nonsense, and obviously that's stuff that does, that's the stuff I really hear about,
Yeah,
more than anything else, And by the way, I've sat in, when they do Twitter Spaces. Have you ever been in those?
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm talking
yeah.
about,
It's
and
cultish.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And the things they say. And
Yeah,
I was in one where the entire purpose of the Twitter space seemed to be to try and get Elon Musk to come into the space. And they were
yeah,
just sat there going, "Do you think?" They didn't say anything. It was like they had like 500 people, and they were just going, "Do you think Elon will come to this one?" And I'm just sat there like, "What? What even is this?" But
yeah.
anyway, the long and the short is, look, funnily enough, I was talking to Jason Lake today. We recorded an interview. Obviously, his team's just got into the major. He just paid over 10 million to buy
10
back
million.
his brand. After the Game Square acquisition of Phase,
Mhm.
which would have created conflict of interests. I might have precluded complexity for competing at things like the major. So
Mhm.
Jason took it into his own hands to get the funding to buy his brand back. And we were shooting the shit. We're all friends. We've known each other a long, long time. I think I first met him in 2006. And he is a big believer in Web3 and blockchain stuff. And I know Jason to be a principled guy, smart guy, a successful guy. And so, my cynicism is always eroded by people like that when they talk about it and they're passionate and they believe. And it was the same when talking to Peter, from Nouns. There's
Right.
definitely something there, right? But as long as the conversation about the technology is dominated, by the people with the pixelated art avatars on Twitter
Yeah.
and the crypto bros and the people looking to asset flip and rug pull and the grifters, we're never going to be able to have a sensible conversation about what the application's going to look like. Now, what Jason said to me, and this makes sense to me, is it's interesting because Counter Strike by and Dota and TF2, they sort of floated what early NFTs.
Mhm.
You own something, but you don't really own it, and it's in a game, and it makes you look good, and it does have some value, but only when you try and sell it, and they get their cut, and it's not physical, and you can't, blah blah blah. So we all accept skins and cosmetics as this like a good idea, and we spend money on them, and we don't own them. And if our
Right.
accounts were to get deactivated or banned, or we forget a password one day, it's all gone. And
Yep.
we spent all that money and we own nothing. What I think probably will happen at some point is this idea of you own an item physically and there's a way to transfer it across multiple titles made by the same developer to have some nominal good for the purposes of doing that, be it purely cosmetic or it might have some other impact in the game. And also, if you ever decide to cash out on it, you just can because it's yours. It's the same as owning a physical piece of media. Now, I don't. The problem we've always got is whenever these developers try to set out to do this, they make sorry, I'm trying to be PG-13 because it's LinkedIn. They make a bad game, right? Sorry, I've done really well. I haven't
You
swore
have,
once.
you have the whole episode.
Yeah, I can do it when I want to. Um,
Cheers.
so yeah, thank you. But yeah, anyway, they make bad games, and then no one plays the games. So the technology's academic. So it has to start with making a good game, and then apply the technology to it, and see what people do with it. And so Jason was saying that today. He said if they make the games, this technology will take off and the light bulb will go on in people's heads. And they will understand that the tech isn't just for rug pulls, and it's not just for this, and it's not just for that. It can have some practical applications within the space. So, listen, I'm open to it. I'm kind of watching it. I think it's totally possible. I just kind of feel we're still not there yet. I think we're a ways off by a few years.
I believe more in I agree with you. I believe more in the philosophy of blockchain than the technology
Sure.
because owning a team doesn't require a blockchain. You can do that with equity crowdfunding, right?
Hmm.
Selling digital assets doesn't require the blockchain. Having digital ownership doesn't require a blockchain. And I think blockchain and Web3 by extension will be a victim of its own success because no one cares or talks about like database driven or cloud games. It's just games.
Yeah.
So imagine, right, if everything is on the blockchain, then we're more or less back to where we are now with a different type of infrastructure.
Hmm.
So everyone's lives will be improved. There will be tons of real digital ownership, but like the supply will make the demand for premiums go to zero.
Hmm.
So yes, things on like skins might still be valuable, but they were already valuable before blockchain was in, or Web3 was introduced into the ecosystem. So it'll be interesting to see that. Thanks so much for your time. I'm going to ask you and recommend that you start to broadcast some of your content from YouTube to LinkedIn, like using this tool, Restream.
A lot of people keep telling me to
I
do it,
think
and
you should. I think you
yeah,
should.
I'd like to. I look at it every day, and I see the people that you probably see too on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Definitely not your audience, and not my followers, and not your followers. But
Right.
you've seen them. You know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be nice to get amongst them and rattle a few cages. So maybe that's the plan.
I
Maybe I
think you
should.
should. Yeah, you just sign into it once, and then it's just a target, just like you would stream directly into YouTube. Like right now, I'm streaming into YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So
Yeah, I think I
I
got this going out to my Discord homies. I didn't put it on Twitch or whatever, so I
yeah.
didn't know if you wanted because I didn't know if that would like interfere with
No,
growing
you
your
should. You
channels or
should.
whatever.
It
So
just it
okay,
brings all the chat into one stream here on our
right,
right side here. But I think that that's a great opportunity for you because a lot of the conversations, whenever I share content from your YouTube to other people, they're like, oh, he's of course that makes perfect sense. But I don't see any of your type of content on YouTube unless I'm sharing something similar or my
right.
circle. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
get
that
it. Okay.
that there's a greenfield opportunity for you there.
Yeah, I'll listen again. As I said, I got that open mind. We'll see how it goes. I mean, again, I think I only posted one article that one time, and it was when I did a piece of satire where I was pretending to sell out just to mock everybody else in the industry,
Yeah.
and people were like going, "Oh, well done, Richard." Now now you're a grown up. You've joined us, and I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it totally went over their heads. But yeah, I appreciate the advice. I'm kind of. I'm kind of looking to do more this year because obviously I'm fully independent,
Yeah.
and I don't work for anybody, and so obviously it's like all avenues of growth are appreciated right now. So yeah, I'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we go, let everybody know about your channels. Shamelessly plug whatever you're working on, things where people can support you.
Oh yeah, listen. Just I guess I'm there on Twitter or X or whatever we call it these days. You should be able to find me. The more famous Richard Lewis sadly passed away recently, so I'm now like I'm the one with the active Twitter account. So that's it really. But definitely go to the Substack, which is I'll read you it's just richardlewis.substack.com. Go there. There are 2 audio podcasts for subscribers, but everything newsworthy will never be paywalled. There is also an archive which goes back a long, long time because every website I've ever written for eventually goes under and all my work goes with it. But I fastidiously save everything. So I'm always adding to the archive from old pieces. So you never know. Instead of coming to ask me in Atlanta, like Marcus did about potential issues, you might find an article about someone that you're about to go into business with. It's always worth using the search bar. So yeah, and obviously, Marcus, man, thanks so much. It's crazy to think it's been as long as it has been. DreamHack Atlanta really doesn't feel that long ago to me. So
Yeah.
and just get me back on anytime you're short for a guest. I do love to chat, so hit me
All
up.
right. Well, it's close to midnight your time. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everybody for joining us. Next week is the season finale. We'll have Renee Gittens, who just launched a cozy game called Potions: A Curious Tale. I think the tale is a play on word because there's a cat in it. She used to be the executive director of IGDA, International Game Developers Association, so she's got a ton of advice and perspective to share. And then we're taking a week off because I'll be at both GDC in San Francisco and then in Boston for a collegiate esports conference. So
Nice.
thanks everybody for your support. We'll see you next week. Richard, you have a good evening and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, you too. Take
All
care.
right.